Estimation with decimals. Well, how do I estimate an answer? This is actually a pretty difficult question because everybody estimates differently. It really depends how good you are at doing your math mentally, and I'll show you an example of this. Let's say you were posed with the question, there were 484 pieces of candy in each bag, and there were 4 bags. About how many pieces of candy were there in all? Now that word about is very important because that is telling you to estimate your answer. Now some people might take 484 and they might round it to 500 and multiply it times the 4 bags and get about or approximately 2,000 pieces of candy. And that'd be perfectly fine. That's a great estimate. Now some people might actually take that same number, 484, and they might round it to the nearest 10, which would be 480. And then they would multiply that times the 4 bags and get 1,920 pieces of candy. That's also an excellent estimation and probably a little bit closer than to the actual answer. Now this is only a good estimate if it's something that you can do in your head. You shouldn't have to write this down on a piece of paper. And I've seen kids do this before. They'll round this to 480 and then I'll see them off to the side doing 480 times 4. Well, if you're going to do all that work, you might as well do the actual answer of 480 times 4. So in order for this to be a good estimate for you, you need to be able to do 480 times 4 in your head, which some kids can actually do that. Okay. Now just remember, the word about, really important, usually indicates that the problem wants you to estimate your answer, and there's your symbol for approximately or about. Let's do a couple examples. Mr. Smith bought 8 shares of stock at $41.68 per share. About how much money did he spend? Well, single digits you really shouldn't round. So I'm going to leave that at 8, but I am going to round this, and I would probably round that to $40, to the nearest 10. So 8 times 40 would be $320. So Mr. Smith spent about $320 on those 8 shares of stock. Now in the next example, Mr. Smith bought 37 shares of stock at $7.19 per share. I would probably take 37 and round it to 40. And I would probably round $7.19 a share to 7. So I spent approximately $280. Now if you could multiply 37 times 7 in your head, which actually would be 210 and 49, 259, that's fine. That would be, as long as you can do that in your head, that would be a great and probably a more accurate estimation of that problem. You shouldn't have to write it down using pen and paper, pencil and paper. Now sometimes on some questions I will ask students to round to the highest place, and this is just so that we have a common answer. And let me give you an example of this. We could probably spend a whole class period estimating this particular question. Let me read it to you. It says, Mr. Smith spent $41.68, $178.12, and $3,589.92. About how much money did he spend? Well, there's so many different ways that we could round this. Some people might choose to round it to 40. Some might choose to round it to 42. Some might choose to round this to 200 or 180 or 178. Some people might round this number to 4,000 or 3,600 or 3,590. So there are so many different combinations and ways that you can estimate. So sometimes what I'll ask students to do is to round to the highest place. Now here's what I mean by that. The highest place in this number is in the tens. So if you were rounding 4168 to the nearest 10, that would be 40. This number, the highest place, is in the hundreds. If I asked you to round 178 $2,489.12 to the nearest 100, that would be 200. And if I asked you to round $3,589.92 to the highest place, that would be in the thousands. That would actually round to 4,000. And if you added all those up, it'd be $4,240. So Mr. Smith spent approximately $4,240. Now, when we do this, it's sometimes not the best estimate, but it gives us all a common answer so that we're not spending the whole class period debating on whose estimation was the best. All right, let's just look at one more last example. I already mentioned this, but when you have single digits, you really shouldn't round them. So Mr. Smith bought 3 shares of stock at $249.18 per share. About how much money did he spend? Well, if I were doing this, I would probably round $249.18 to 250 and just multiply that times 3. That'd be real easy to do it in your head. If you rounded it to the highest place, this would actually be a pretty bad estimation, because to the highest place, you would round that to 200 times 3, which is 600. And this is clearly the better estimate for that question. So I hope that helps you a little bit on how you estimate with decimals.